Hi, howdy, hello, what's up guys? Welcome back to Dead Malls, the only place on YouTube where you can find Kmarts, malls, and a charming host all in the same video. Today as we begin day 3 of our Michigan expedition, we head up north into the beautiful Tri-Cities, and as we explore the Bay region, we find some of the most beautiful malls on the expedition. To start us off, we have the southernmost city, Saginaw's Fashion Square Mall, a true modern beauty. A mall that, despite its glamorous looks, it's largely vacant, and a mall that literally just puzzles me. Why? Well, stick around to find out. Today and day 4 were the days that literally sold me on Michigan. Throughout my drive up the Gold Coast, I saw some of the best mixes of abandoned Kmarts and beach towns with kite festivals, and I just loved it. Before we get started here, I'd like to shout out our winner who was able to successfully guess the next mall. Very nice job, Andrew15. If you would like to have your chance of being shouted out in the next episode, stick around for the next challenge. Anyways, let's finish up our exterior drive around here, head in, and tell the story of the first of the Tri-City malls, and see how it's doing as of July of 2022. Immediately upon entering Fashion Square, I just knew that this would be a fascinating case. Most people call this mall boring or the uninteresting one, and while yes, I'll admit the other two are a little more aesthetically pleasing, I was still personally just taken aback by the emptiness of Fashion Square. I'll admit I did go right at opening, so many of the stores weren't open yet, but that didn't change the fact that dozens of stores upon the opening wing here were just empty scars. Fashion Square's story begins over 50 years ago in the city of Saginaw, Michigan, the southernmost of the Tri-Cities, with the other two being Bay City and Midland. Saginaw was experiencing an explosive growth in population. While it didn't lean too heavily on the auto industry, GM still employed a good chunk of the city's population, and by the late 60s the north side was growing as the city's main suburban push, and with the suburbs had to come retail. The city itself already had a mall at this point, Fort Saginaw Mall to the southeast. However, this small, extremely outdated 60s mall, anchored by Kmart and Federals, was just not bringing the city much glamour in the mall scene. And so, developers Richard E. Jacobs, seeing the potential in a new mall on the north side, would capitalize, and soon plans were drawn out for this new mall, with anchors Sears and JCPenney confirmed. And with the site chosen, construction would quickly begin in 1970, with an opening date scheduled for late 1972. So while recording here in the JCPenney wing, I was able to see some of the mall's last remaining businesses. And it's so weird, right? Or am I the only one? Like, how does the entire entrance wing sit completely dead, but there's still some stores here? I guess it just goes to show how important the anchors are, and how they're literally the last bits holding this mall together. I just don't know. It's a question that still haunts my dreams. One of the only downsides to Fashion Square was the fact that the entire time I was here, I was constantly being followed around by a pesky security guard. Would you believe me if I told you it was difficult to film in a mall where I was the only one in there? I'm sure I didn't look suspicious whatsoever. Fashion Square Mall would officially open for business on October 4th, 1972. Shoppers at the time were greeted to a mall marvel unlike any other in the region. Spanned out across 650,000 square feet of leasable retail space lie over 85 inline tenants, with such notables including Aladdin's Castle, Hot Sam, Town & Country Fashions, Bin Sports, and Tate's Hobby Shop, among many others. Sears and JCPenney looked at each other from across the mallway, with the Central Court expansion in the works, and in 1976, Detroit-based Hudson's would open as the mall's third and final anchor. Upon the mall's hallways, shoppers could indulge themselves in modern amenities such as conversation pits, palmed plants, dozens of skylights, and in the center court, a dazzling fountain consisting of several levels of cascading water with a golden statue perched atop, all surrounded, of course, by tropical plants. While the sounds of afternoon delight, cascading water, and crowds of people filled the smoke-tinted air, children played down by the fountain, begging every cent out of their parents, and it was solidified in culture. Fashion Square was more than just a mall throughout the rest of the 70s and 80s. It was a home away from home for the residents of Saginaw and the surrounding Bay cities, and it was the first star in a soon-to-be constellation of the Tri-City malls. I absolutely love the 70s style tray ceilings that still remain in the center court and over to Macy's. While a lot of the mall's OG 70s aesthetics were stripped in an upcoming remodel, they at least kept those. Also, just the sheer wideness of the corridors, only to be filled with an occasional love seat or Pepsi machine. It's a real far cry from the glamorous plants and fountains of the past. As we get into the next era of Fashion Square, we really dive into the fashion. And with this vaporwave, I can just imagine the models that once walked down the super tiny runway, glamorizing themselves in the mall's vaporwave. Let's get to that. Burnt oranges, tan tiles, and brown garnishes ornated throughout the mall, and by the early 90s, these looks just weren't in fashion anymore. I mean, the name, it was false advertising. In the other cities of Bay City and Midland, 1991 would be a big year. Bay City Mall and Midland Mall would both open as the second and third malls of the Tri-Cities. Instantly, shoppers of Saginaw had incentive to drive just 10 miles either way to visit these malls, leaving Fashion Square in a bit of a rut. 1993 would see the first major change in over a decade with the opening of the food court on the north end near Sears. And just 7 years later in 2000, CBL would acquire the mall from Jacobs, immediately planning out a facelift that would completely reinvent Fashion Square and bring it back to being the top mall in the region. In 2001, a $10 million renovation would change almost every facet of Fashion Square Mall. Upon reopening, shoppers were greeted to the look you see today. Modern bright whites and yellows filled the halls. Sadly, the fountain itself was no more, instead being replaced with a few palm trees. It got mixed reviews upon opening. Folks more fond of the 70s look had it the worst, swallowing the pill that their Fashion Square was just no longer fashionable, while younger crowds saw the beautiful mall as finally on par with the other two. That same year of 2001, Hudson's would become Marshall Field's, with the temporary banner going up while a more permanent nameplate was installed. Even though just 5 years later in 2006 it would be changed yet again, with the store being rebranded to Macy's. The later years of the 2000s would be a mixed bag for Fashion Square. While the recession came and went, Saginaw would lose thousands in population. It was, unfortunately, yet another Michigan city in the crosshairs of the manufacturing decline. In turn, tenants like McDonald's, Suncoast, Dunham's, Steve & Barry's, Ruby Tuesdays, and even Garfield's would all close. 2009 was also the year Saginaw's original mall, Fort Saginaw Mall, would be demolished, as it had been sitting abandoned for years prior. This fun shop coming up here, which, for those unaware, is a really off-brand arcade company, usually found in Michigan's most dead malls. Prime real estate, I guess. Used to be the candy store, with a GameStop right next door. You tell me though, is it coincidence, or are they almost paying homage to the classic timeout arcades of the past with those colors and details? You be the judge. As we get towards the old Sears here, we drown out the sounds of the seagulls with a Liminal vaporwave track by the amazing album Sky Tower 2032, an album about the loss of pleasure and humanity, the loss of casinos, nightclubs, theme parks, and shopping malls, about the consumeristic destruction in our lives and how in the future we all just move into a big tower, and the yearning of the past that we will never get to live again. To all who experienced Fashion Square in a time where it seemed like malls would never fall, what is it like to see it fall? As someone who grew up with stores like Walmart and Target, will I lose those places in my lifetime? What's the next big thing that kills off our retail? And will all of us ultimately just end up in a massive, pleasureless sky tower, yearning for the better days long gone? The mall was still doing decent by 2016, about 80% occupancy. The addition of an H&M would further that. However, Namdar Realty would purchase it in July of the same year, ultimately beginning the spell of loss. Tenants would rapidly close once again, and in August of 2019, Sears announced closure, with the first of the anchors going dark in October. And throughout the pandemic, dozens more stores would close, primarily near Sears, the food court, and oddly enough, the entrance hallway. Fashion Square would sit emptier and emptier with each passing day, often left to residents as just a shell of a once great shopping mall.
Thank you. Please go about your day and enjoy this echo jam.
So, what does the future hold for Fashion Square? Is it still in fashion? And if so, for how much longer? I mean, with a dead entrance and closing stores spreading like a plague, how much longer until those doors are closed for the final time? Shortly after my visit in July, Kohan would buy the mall from Namdar in September, like a game of dead mall hot potato. I truly do believe if the mall loses either JCPenney or Macy's, it is doomed. Although, truthfully, I wouldn't see that anytime soon, as both are the only remaining locations in the entire region. Will Fashion Square be the first star of the constellation to fade and die? Let me know what you think down below. Guys, thank you so much for watching tonight's episode. After dealing with hail damage, work stress, and general stress, it's nice knowing you're all still here for me. If you guys enjoy my demo content, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future Deadmall's episodes. And be sure to head over to Patreon for a monthly Deadmall Polaroid taken and signed by me. Next week, we'll be heading to one of the most calming and retro 90s malls in the Tri-Cities. We take it back to 91 with a classic retro Spencer's, which you can't miss. Be the first to guess which mall we'll be at, and I'll shout you out in the next episode. Anyways, until then, have yourselves a lovely day, and peace out, guys. See you later.
Neon lights, make the needs of road.